If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you, then you need to hear this story. My name is Harper, and this is how I turned my ex-boyfriend's cruelest game back on him and took back my life. It started with a breakup, but it ended with a lesson he and his entire enabling family would never forget. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the ending, because it's not just about getting even, it's about getting free. My story with Colin was a slow burn of a disaster, the kind you don't recognize until you're already engulfed in flames. He was brilliant, I'll give him that. Charismatic, handsome, and the owner of Mindtrap, the city's most popular and elaborate escape room company. He designed worlds, intricate, beautiful, frustrating worlds made of puzzles and locks and hidden passages. And I, for a long time, was his biggest fan. I was also his secret weapon. He was the architect, the visionary. I was the one who crawled through the ductwork of his beta tests, pointing out that a magnet puzzle wouldn't work next to a speaker system, or that a specific color-coded sequence was impossible for someone with red-green color blindness. I was his quality control, his sounding board, his unpaid, uncredited co-designer, and I loved it. I thought my support was the foundation of our relationship. I mistook his reliance on my skills for respect. I was wrong. The arrogance that made his rooms so compelling was in reality a deeply rooted part of his personality. He saw people, including me, as pieces on his game board, to be moved, to be used, and eventually to be discarded. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday. It was our 3-year anniversary. He'd been hyping his newest room for months. He called it the Labyrinth of Lyra, a mythological epic that was, in his words, unsolvable, his masterpiece. He told me he had a special anniversary surprise for me and that I should meet him at the Mindtrap building after it closed. I was excited. I pictured a private dinner set up in the lobby, or maybe a clue trail leading to a gift. I wore my favorite dress, a deep blue silk that he always said he loved. When I arrived, the lobby was empty, lit only by the faint glow of the neon sign. A single envelope was taped to the heavy, gear-shaped door of the new room. My name, Harper, was written on it in his precise architectural handwriting. Inside, a simple card said, "The ultimate test, for my ultimate partner. Solve it, and your reward awaits." I smiled, my heart thrumming with a foolish, romantic beat. Of course, this was his way of proposing, wasn't it? A grand, theatrical gesture perfectly suited to him. He wanted me to conquer his greatest creation, and at the end, he would be there, on one knee. It was arrogant, yes, but it was also him. I felt a surge of love and exasperation. I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of fresh paint and ozone filling my lungs, and pushed open the heavy door. It clicked shut behind me, with a definitive, echoing thud. The room was stunning. It was a recreation of a celestial observatory, with star charts painted on the walls and a massive brass orrery in the center of the room. A disembodied, digitized voice, Colin's voice, filled the space. "Welcome, Harper. The Labyrinth of Lyra awaits. You have 60 minutes. Your time starts now." A large digital clock on the wall began to count down from 60:00. I went to work immediately. My mind, trained by years of his logic, saw the patterns instantly. The constellations on the wall weren't random, they corresponded to the gears on the orrery. The star charts had hidden numbers in the nebulas, a sequence for a directional lock on a heavy wooden chest. I moved with a speed and confidence that would have shocked his regular customers. It was like a dance. My hands flew across cryptexes and magnetic sliders. I didn't need the clue tablet mounted on the wall. I knew his tricks. The red herring puzzles, the misdirection, the way he loved to hide keys in plain sight. Every solved puzzle felt like a step closer to that perfect, imagined moment. I was so caught up in the game, in the thrill of the solve, that I didn't see the truth. I didn't understand the real game being played. The final puzzle was in the chest. It was a complex wiring puzzle, a mess of colored cables and ports. The goal was to connect them in a specific sequence to power up a small, ornate box on a pedestal in the corner. As I plugged in the final wire, a soft green light illuminated the box. It clicked open. Inside, there was no ring, no heartfelt letter. There was just a small folded piece of paper. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly, my smile unwavering. This was it, the final reveal. I unfolded it. 5 words were printed in stark black ink. 5 words that shattered the entire fantasy I had built for myself. You're trapped, and we're over. For a full minute, I just stood there, the paper rattling in my hand. The clock on the wall read 42:18. He'd solved his unsolvable room in 18 minutes, and this was my reward. Not a proposal, not a celebration, a dismissal, a cruel, elaborate prank designed to break me. He hadn't just broken up with me, he had weaponized the very thing we had built together. He had used my love for his work, my intimate knowledge of his mind, to humiliate me. He hadn't just wanted to end it, he wanted to win. He wanted to prove that even in our relationship's final moments, he was the master of the game, and I was just a player, trapped in his world. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, suffocating. The beautiful observatory became a cage. The ticking of the clock sounded like a jeer, and in that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened, it crystallized into a single, cold, diamond-hard thought. He thinks he's trapped me. He has no idea who he's dealing with. The first wave that hit me wasn't sadness. It was a white-hot, blinding rage. The kind that makes your vision go fuzzy at the edges and your ears ring. I crumpled the note in my fist, the paper crackling in the sudden, tomb-like silence of the room. Over, just like that, after 3 years. After countless nights I'd spent debugging his code, untangling his plot holes, and celebrating his successes, as if they were my own. He didn't even have the courage to say it to my face. He had to build a monument to his own cowardice, an elaborate stage for his cruelty, and lock me inside it. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was what took my breath away. He was so certain of my failure, so convinced that I would be stuck in here for the full hour, weeping and confused, only to find his pathetic little note at the last second. He probably imagined me, broken and defeated, pounding on the door, begging to be let out, only for him to open it with a smug, pitying look on his face. He wanted to see me shattered. That was the real prize for him. My knees felt weak, and I leaned against the central orrery, its cold brass, a shocking contrast to the heat flushing my skin. And then the flashbacks started. Not the good ones, not the laughter, or the late-night talks. My mind, in a desperate act of self-preservation, started pulling up evidence. It was like my subconscious was building a legal case against him, presenting exhibits of every time I had been warned, every red flag I had willingly ignored. Exhibit A, the Celestial Spheres Room, his first big hit. I remembered a night, about a year into our relationship. We were in his workshop. The room was set to launch in 2 days, and a central puzzle, a complex gear mechanism, had a fatal flaw. It would jam every third rotation. Colin was panicked, pacing and cursing, ready to scrap the whole thing. I stayed up with him until 4 a.m., sketching out a new gear ratio on a greasy napkin from our takeout. I figured out that a simple counterweight, a concept from a physics class I'd taken, would solve the entire issue. He built it, it worked perfectly, and the room became a legend. A week later, a local magazine did a feature on him. The reporter asked him about the genius of the gear puzzle. I was standing right there, beaming, waiting for him to mention my contribution. He just smiled his charming smile and said, "It came to me in a dream. Sometimes the best ideas just fall out of the sky." He didn't even glance at me. I felt a sting, but I told myself he was just caught up in the moment. I excused it. I buried it. Exhibit A, a family dinner with his parents, Marcus and Eleanor, at their sterile modernist home that looked more like an art gallery than a place where people actually lived. His parents were wealthy, old money types who treated Colin like a prodigy and me like a curious pet he'd brought home. Eleanor, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and diamond earrings that seemed to judge my very existence, had asked me what I did for a living. I told her I was a project manager for a software development firm. She'd given me a tight, condescending smile. "Oh, that's nice, dear, keeping things organized. It's so important to have a hobby." Colin, who was sitting right next to me, just chuckled and changed the subject. He never defended me. He never said, "Actually, Mom, Harper is brilliant. Her mind for logic is the reason my company is so successful." He just let her dismiss me, let her shrink my career into a quaint little pastime, and I let him. I drank my overpriced wine and said nothing, because I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to embarrass him. What a fool I'd been. I was so worried about his comfort, while he felt no compunction about sacrificing my dignity. It wasn't about revenge back then. It was about love, I thought. I was making small sacrifices for the good of the relationship. But looking back, I see now they weren't small sacrifices. They were concessions. I was conceding my worth, piece by piece, in exchange for his affection. Exhibit C, the final damning piece of evidence. Just 2 months ago, he was accepting an award, Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He stood on a stage, under bright lights, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. He gave a speech, thanking his investors, his team, even the barista who made his coffee every morning. He talked about his vision, his passion, his relentless pursuit of perfection. He never said my name. I was sitting at a table in the front row, wearing a dress he'd picked out, my stomach in knots. Maya, my best friend, was with me. She leaned over and whispered, "He's really not going to mention you, is he?" The hope I'd been clinging to all night shriveled and died. After the ceremony, I confronted him, my voice shaking. I asked him why he could thank a stranger for coffee, but not the woman who helped him build his empire. He looked at me, not with remorse, but with a kind of weary frustration. "Harper, don't be so dramatic. It's a business award." What was I supposed to say? "Thanks to my girlfriend for having some good ideas." It would sound unprofessional. "You're being too sensitive, too dramatic." Those were his favorite weapons. The twin verbal daggers he used to stab me with whenever my feelings became inconvenient for him. And for 3 years I had believed him. I had questioned myself, my reactions. Was I overreacting? Was I asking for too much? I see it so clearly now. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. He was conditioning me to accept the bare minimum, to be grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement he chose to toss my way. The breakdown was happening, but it wasn't the kind he expected. It wasn't tears and sobbing. It was a terrifying, cold calm. The rage receded, replaced by an Arctic clarity. The emotional fog I had been living in for years dissipated, and I saw Colin for exactly what he was. A narcissistic child, hiding in a man's body. A man who thought love was a game you win by making the other person lose. The love I felt for him didn't just die. It curdled into something else. It became a debt, and I was going to make him pay. The catalyst wasn't just his note, it was the room itself. As my mind cleared, I started to see it not as a prison, but as an opportunity. This room, his supposed masterpiece, was his greatest vulnerability, because I didn't just know his logic. I knew his laziness. I knew his shortcuts, and I knew his passwords. I walked over to the clue tablet, mounted on the wall. He used these in all his rooms. They were locked down, of course, only allowing access to the pre-programmed hint system. But I had watched him set them up dozens of times. He used the same brand, the same software, for every single room in the Mindtrap building. And Colin, for all his genius in puzzle design, was arrogant about cybersecurity. He always said, "No customer is ever going to try to hack the hint tablet, Harper. It's a non-issue." He was right. A customer wouldn't. But I wasn't a customer. I was the woman he had just scorned. The woman who knew he used the same default admin password for everything Mastermind 1. It was just so him. I tapped a corner of the screen in a specific sequence, a maintenance backdoor I'd seen him use. A login prompt appeared. I typed in the username admin and the password Mastermind 1. A loading icon spun for a second, and then the hint system vanished. I was looking at the tablet's raw operating system. My heart gave a powerful, triumphant thud. I was in. From here I could access the building's local network. It was sloppy, unsecured, something I had warned him about a year ago. He'd waved me off, saying a hardwired, closed network was too expensive. "We're not protecting state secrets. We're running a game," he'd said. He thought it was a game. He was about to learn. The rules had changed. My resolve hardened from a decision into a plan. I wasn't just going to get out. I was going to take over. I was going to flip the board. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. Suddenly the 60-minute clock on the wall wasn't a threat, it was a deadline. A deadline for my coup. I had 40 minutes left. It was more than enough time. My fingers flew across the tablet screen. The first step was to establish my credentials, to prove to myself this was real. I navigated through the poorly organized network folders, my mind mapping the digital architecture. I had helped him design. I found the central control hub for the labyrinth of Lyra. It was all there. The lighting controls, the audio triggers, the magnetic lock protocols. With a few taps, I could have unlocked the exit door and walked out. The thought was tempting. Just leave. Disappear from his life. Let him walk into the empty room, find my discarded note, and wonder what happened. But that wasn't enough. That was a quiet victory, and what he had done demanded a response. Walking away felt like forgiveness, and I was nowhere near ready to forgive. He wanted to trap me, to make me feel powerless. I was going to show him what real powerlessness felt like. The plan began to form in my mind, elegant and vicious. I wouldn't just escape. I would reprogram his sanctuary into a prison of his own making. I needed an ally, a voice on the outside.
The tablet had a Wi-Fi connection.
He used it to push software updates, another security flaw I'd warned him about. I opened a browser and logged into my email. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was adrenaline. I sent a short, cryptic message to my best friend, Maya. The subject line was code red. The body was just 3 sentences. Colin's big surprise was a breakup. He locked me in the new room. I'm fine, but I'm about to do something crazy. Stand by. Maya was my voice of reason, the one who had been gently trying to tell me for years that Colin was a user. She never said I told you so. She just listened, offered a couch when I needed to vent, and kept a bottle of my favorite tequila in her freezer for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. Her reply came back in less than a minute. What do you need? Tell me you're not keying his car. I smiled for the first time in an hour. Something better. I'm hijacking the room. I need you to do some research for me. Find the website for the most popular, most media-savvy couples therapist in the city. Someone with online booking and a very public profile. Her response was just a single glorious word. On it. With Maya working on her end, I turned my attention to the room's hardware. This was my hidden leverage, my intimate, encyclopedic knowledge of his systems. Colin designed the narrative, the big picture. I was the one who understood the guts. I knew that the final puzzle, the one that opened the box with his cruel note, was on a separate circuit, a fail-safe, so if the main power went out, the reveal would still function. But I also knew it was tied to the main control panel. He had to be able to reset it from the outside. That meant there was a connection. I used the tablet to access the room's schematics, the very blueprints I had helped him proofread, and there it was. A secondary input on the control board for the exit door. It was designed for an emergency keycard override from the control room. It was an unlocked digital door, waiting for a new key. My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1, the silent takeover. I would let the clock run down. I would play the part of the trapped victim. I needed him to come in, to swagger into his own creation, expecting to find me in pieces. Phase 2, the reversal. Once he was inside, the game would change. My puzzle would begin. I started coding on the tablet, my fingers moving with a forgotten fluency from my old programming classes. I wrote a simple script. It was a conditional command, linked to the main exit door's sensor. The door was currently programmed to be unlocked from the outside, and locked from the inside. A standard escape room setup. My script was simple. Upon the door sensor, registering 1 open and close cycle, it would reverse the logic. The door would become permanently locked from the outside, and would only be openable from the inside, by solving a new puzzle, a puzzle I was about to design. I looked around the room, not as a player, but as a creator. What would be the perfect trap for a man like Colin? It couldn't be logic. He'd solve it in minutes. It had to be emotional. It had to be based on things he should know, but that his arrogance had made him forget. It had to be a test of our history, a history he had just tried to erase. I saw the Dishir Ori in the center of the room. It had 8 planets, each on a rotating gear. That would be my input device. 8 planets, 8 questions. A new email dinged on the tablet. It was from Maya. It was a link to a website for a Dr. Annabelle Voss. Her site was sleek, professional, and featured a prominent blog with titles like Communication is a Superpower and Ending a Relationship with Respect. Her tagline, emblazoned across the top, was perfect: building better connections, 1 conversation at a time. Below that, a large button said book a live stream consultation now. It was better than I could have imagined. I saved the link. This would be the prize for solving my puzzle. not freedom, education. I started to work on the specifics of my design. The Ori planets would need to be turned in a specific sequence. Each planet would correspond to a memory, a moment he had dismissed or ignored. Mercury, the swiftest planet, would be the date I solved his celestial spheres puzzle for him. Venus, the planet of love, would be the anniversary he forgot last year. Earth would be the address of the first apartment we shared, the one I found and put the deposit down on. Mars, the god of war, would be the name of the company that gave him the Entrepreneur of the Year's award, the one where he failed to mention my name. Jupiter, the king of the gods, would represent his father Marcus, whose birthday he was always so proud of remembering. Saturn with its rings would be the name of the restaurant where he was supposed to propose, a fantasy I now saw as utterly naive. Uranus would be the model of the first car I bought for myself, which he called sensible and boring. And Neptune, the god of the sea, would represent the coastal town where I grew up, a place he always called quaint and never bothered to visit with me. These were the details of my life, the life I had shared with him, the very details he had deemed unimportant. Now his freedom would depend on them. I linked each of these answers, converted into a numerical sequence, into a new puzzle command on the tablet. If he entered the sequence correctly, it wouldn't open the door. It would activate the room's video projector and open a web browser to one specific URL, Dr. Voss's website. The final brutal touch was the door lock itself. The script I wrote had a final condition. The door would only unlock after the booking confirmation cookie from Dr. Voss's site was detected on the network. He wouldn't just have to see the therapist page, he'd have to book a session. Live from inside his own trap, my work was done. I looked at the clock. 3:14. I leaned back, closed the browser, and wiped the tablet clean of my activity, leaving only the standard clue screen. I placed it back on its wall mount. Then I sat on the floor, crossed my legs, and waited for the game master to arrive. The digital clock on the wall hit 0 o'clock, and a loud, obnoxious buzzer sounded. It was a sound I knew well, the "you failed" sound. It was designed to be demoralizing. Tonight it sounded like an overture. A few seconds later, I heard the telltale clunk of the maglock on the exit door, disengaging. I held my breath. The heavy, gear-shaped door swung inward, silhouetting Colin's frame in the dim light of the lobby. He was exactly as I'd pictured, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a look of smug pity on his face. He was still in the suit from his award ceremony, a detail that now seemed pathetic rather than impressive. "Harper," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "You couldn't solve it. I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed. I thought you, of all people, would at least make it to the final clue." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him from my spot on the floor, my face a perfect mask of neutrality. I let the silence hang in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't the reaction he'd practiced. He was expecting tears, accusations, hysterics. He was expecting a scene. I was giving him nothing. He took a step into the room, letting the door swing shut behind him, and in that moment, my simple little script went to work. I heard a soft click, quieter than the initial unlock, but a sound that was thunderous to my ears. It was the sound of the maglock re-engaging, but this time, with its logic reversed. The trap was set. He was now locked in with me, but he didn't know it yet. "Look, Harper," he began, walking towards the center of the room, adopting the tone of a benevolent king, explaining a difficult decision to a peasant. "I know this seems dramatic, but I wanted to be clear. I didn't want any ambiguity. We've been growing apart for a while, and he trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the room around him. "This is what I do. I create experiences. I thought it was fitting. The word hung in the air. He thought this monument to his cruelty was a fitting end to 3 years of my life. The cold resolve in my chest solidified into something that felt like bedrock. He was still looking at me, waiting for me to break, for me to finally give him the emotional payoff he craved. "Did you even find the note?" he asked, his voice laced with a strange mixture of ego and impatience. I slowly uncurled my fist and let the crumpled ball of paper drop to the floor. His eyes followed it. "Ah," he said, nodding. "So you know." I still hadn't spoken a word. My silence was unnerving him more than any screaming match could have. It was a variable he hadn't accounted for. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a nervous tick I knew he hated. "Well, aren't you going to say anything?" I finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. My voice, when it came out, was steady and devoid of emotion. I solved it in 18 minutes, Colin. His brow furrowed. The smugness vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. What? That's impossible. The beta test teams took an average of 75 minutes, and they didn't even finish. Your beta test teams don't know that you always use a Fibonacci sequence for your rotational puzzles, I said calmly. And they don't know that you hide the final key for your cryptexes under the magnetic north marking on the compass rose. You've done it 3 times now. It's lazy. A flash of anger crossed his face. It was the first genuine emotion he'd shown. Not anger at his own cruelty, but anger at having his genius questioned. It's not lazy, it's a signature. It's a vulnerability, I countered, my voice still level. I slowly got to my feet, and this whole room is full of them. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. Oh, here we go. You're going to critique my masterpiece now. Is that it? You're angry, I get it. But don't try to attack my work just because your feelings are hurt. My feelings aren't hurt, Colin, I said, and the terrifying thing was, it was true. The hurt had burned away, leaving something much colder and more dangerous in its place. I'm just disappointed. For a man who calls himself a mastermind, you got sloppy. He scoffed and turned his back on me, walking towards the door. Whatever, I'm done with this conversation. It's over, Harper. Let's go. He grabbed the handle of the heavy door and pulled. Nothing happened. He pulled again, harder this time, a grunt of effort escaping his lips. The door didn't budge. He jiggled the handle, then banged his fist against the metal. What the hell? Did the power surge or something? He fumbled for his phone. I'll just call Mark in engineering to override it. He stabbed at his phone screen, then held it to his ear. I watched as his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion, and then to the first, beautiful flicker of panic. There's no signal, he said, his voice a little higher than before. Why is there no signal? I blocked it, I said simply. The room has its own internal network jammer, to prevent players from cheating and looking up answers on their phones. You explained it to me yourself. I just reactivated it through the admin panel on the clue tablet. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. The pieces were starting to click into place in his mind, but they were forming a picture he couldn't comprehend. You hacked the tablet. Your password is mastermind, one said, I said, the words tasting like victory. It's the password for everything, Colin. The network, the control hub, your laptop, even your stupid food delivery app. You're brilliant at designing puzzles, but you're an idiot when it comes to protecting them. The panic in his eyes was blossoming now, a beautiful, dark flower. He lunged for the clue tablet on the wall, his hands fumbling as he tried to access the admin panel himself. But I had been thorough. I had changed the password. He was locked out of his own system. What did you do? He whispered, turning back to me, his face pale under the theatrical lighting. What did you do, Harper? I gave him the first real smile of the night. It wasn't a happy smile. It was all teeth. I did what you taught me to do, I said. I created an experience, a new game. Your game had one rule: solve the puzzle and get a message. My game is a little different. Solve the puzzle, and you get to see a therapist. His face was a perfect portrait of disbelief and dawning horror. The game master was now a player, and I had a feeling he was going to be very, very bad at it. His first move was predictable: brute force. He threw his shoulder against the door again and again, the metallic clang echoing through the observatory. It was useless. The maglock was rated to withstand 1,000 pounds of pressure. He knew that. He'd bragged about it at a dinner party once. After a few more futile attempts, he slumped against it, breathing heavily, his expensive suit now rumpled and stained with sweat. The panic had fully set in, raw and undisguised. "This is insane, Harper," he yelled, his voice cracking. "This is illegal. You're kidnapping me. I'll have you arrested." "Will you?" I asked, my voice still maddeningly calm. "What will you tell the police, Colin? That you decided to break up with your girlfriend by locking her in a windowless room, and she, what, flipped the script? It's not a very flattering story. In fact, some might say it sounds a lot like you kidnapped me first." This was the beauty of his own plan. Its cruelty was its own undoing. To admit what I had done, he would have to admit what he had done first. Checkmate. He started pacing the room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, his composure completely gone. He was looking for another way out, a secret exit, a maintenance hatch. It was ironic. The man who designed inescapable rooms was now desperately searching for an escape. He knew, better than anyone, that there wasn't one. That's when he turned to his last resort, his ultimate weapon, his parents. He found the one spot in the corner where a sliver of cell signal sometimes leaked through from the lobby. He must have remembered it from the installation phase. He crouched down, holding his phone at a bizarre angle. A minute later, I could hear the faint, tinny voice of his mother, Eleanor. His voice was a panicked whine. "Mom, you have to get down here. Harper's gone crazy. She's locked me in the new room, and she won't let me out." I just watched him, the prodigy, the mastermind, the young entrepreneur of the year, calling his mommy for help. It was pathetic, but it was also part of my calculation. I knew he would call them, and I knew they would come. About 20 minutes later, a furious pounding started on the other side of the exit door. "Harper, this is Eleanor and Marcus Vance. Open this door this instant." Eleanor's voice was sharp and imperious, amplified by the metal of the door. "This is not a game. You are committing a serious crime." I walked over to the wall and activated the intercom system. Another feature I knew was there for the game master to communicate with players. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, my voice broadcasting clearly into the lobby. "It's lovely to hear from you." There was a sputtering silence from the other side. Then his father's voice, deeper and more threatening. "Don't play games with us, young lady. You let our son out of there right now, or we will call the authorities and have them break down this door. You don't want that, do you?" This was the moment, the family exodus. The moment I formally and permanently exiled them from my life, and from this situation they thought they could control with money and threats. "Actually, Marcus, I don't think you will call them," I said into the intercom, my tone light and conversational. "Because the first thing they'll do is ask why Colin is in there, and he'll have to tell them he locked me in first, as a creative way to dump me, and then I'll show them the note he left me. And my lawyer, who Maya has already contacted by the way, will have a field day with the story. Local business mogul traps girlfriend in sadistic breakup prank. It's not a good look for the brand, is it?" The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in their heads, as they processed the public relations nightmare I had just laid out for them. They weren't worried about Colin's safety. They were worried about the family name, about appearances. They always were. "What do you want, Harper?" Eleanor's voice was different now. The threats were gone, replaced by a tense, transactional tone. This was a language they understood. Negotiation. "I don't want anything from you, Eleanor," I replied. "This is between me and Colin. He designed a game that assist Iridi and Ned. I'm simply making him play it to the end. The rules are very simple. He solves my puzzle, and the door opens." "A puzzle?" I heard Colin shout from inside the room. "She's turned it into another damn puzzle." "Be quiet, Colin," Marcus snapped, his voice faint but clear. Then into the intercom, "Just let him out. This is ridiculous. Whatever he did, I'm sure he's sorry. We can compensate you for your trouble." Compensate me. They thought they could buy their way out of this. They thought my dignity had a price tag. It was the most insulting thing they could have possibly said, and it confirmed every single thing I had ever thought about them. They were enablers of the highest order, the architects of their son's monstrous ego. They had raised a king, and now they were furious that a pawn had dared to take him off the board. "He's not for sale, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping the pleasantries, "and neither am I. My puzzle is about accountability, not cash. It's a concept you might want to look up. Now, if you'll excuse me, the game master has a lot to learn." With that, I switched off the intercom. I could still hear their muffled shouts through the door, but they were fading. They were powerless. They had come to rescue their golden child, only to find themselves on the wrong side of a locked door, their influence and their money utterly useless. The exodus was complete. It was just me and Colin now, alone with the consequences. Colin was a wreck. The sight of his parents' fippling, of their power being so utterly neutralized, seemed to have broken him completely. He slid down the wall and put his head in his hands. All the arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a terrified, petulant man-child. He wasn't the designer, the genius, the mastermind anymore. He was just a guy, locked in a room. For a brief fleeting moment, I almost felt a sliver of pity for him. But then I remembered the note. I remembered his smug face in the doorway. I remembered the years of being diminished and dismissed. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was a currency he hadn't earned. Okay, he said, his voice muffled by his hands. Okay, what is it? What's the puzzle? I pointed to the orrery in the center of the room. The planets, I said. You need to arrange them in the correct sequence. There are 8 planets, 8 moments from our life together that you should remember. Get the sequence right, and you get your prize. He looked up, his face streaked with sweat. Our life? What are you talking about? This is a celestial observatory, not a scrapbook. Every puzzle needs a theme. Colin, I said, echoing a phrase he had told me 100 times. This one's theme is things Harper cared about, that Colin ignored. He flinched, but he got to his feet and stumbled over to the orrery. He looked at the 8 brass planets, each on its own intricate gear. His hands hovered over them, uncertainly. This is stupid, he muttered. How am I supposed to know what you're thinking? That's the point, I said softly. You never did. The first planet was Mercury. I gave him a clue. The day I saved your first big hit. He stared blankly. He spun the gear, trying to guess. Nothing happened. He tried again. The celestial sphere room, I said, my patience wearing thin. The jamming gear mechanism. What was the date? He shook his head, looking completely lost. I don't know. A Tuesday? Sometime in May. I had to feed him the answer. It was pathetic. The pattern repeated for Venus. Our second anniversary, I prompted. He guessed 3 different dates before I corrected him. It was a slow, agonizing process. With each failed guess, a new layer of his ego was peeled away. He was being confronted, in real time, with a verifiable record of his own neglect. The things that had been cornerstones of my memory were complete blanks in his. The address of our first apartment, the name of the award he'd won. He didn't know. He had to be told. It was a humiliating, brutal education. The final planet was Neptune, representing the coastal town where I grew up. You never visited, I said, but I told you the name 100 times. It's where my family still lives. He just stared at the planet, his face pale. He didn't know. He had no idea. After a full minute of agonizing silence, he finally whispered, I don't know, Harper. I don't remember. It was the first honest thing he had said all night. It's Port Blossom, I said, my voice flat. I entered the final part of the sequence for him. For a second, nothing happened. Then the main projector on the ceiling, word to life. It didn't project a star chart. It projected a website. Dr. Annabelle Voss's smiling professional face looked down on us. Her tagline, Building Better Connections, was lit up on the wall like a prophecy. Colin stared at it, his mouth hanging open. What is this? That's your prize, I explained. That's the way out. And then the room's front-facing camera, the one he used to monitor players, flickered on. Its feed appeared in a small window on the website projection. It was a live stream. A live stream of his own shocked, horrified face, broadcast directly onto the page under the banner. Is this how you communicate? He looked from his image on the wall to me, pure, unadulterated horror dawning in his eyes. He understood now. The trap wasn't just the room, it was this. Public, professional humiliation, aimed directly at the heart of his ego. You're live streaming this, he whispered, his voice trembling. To a therapist's website, the door will not open until a session is booked, I said, delivering the final blow. The lock is tied to the website's booking confirmation. You want out, Colin? You have to click the button. You have to admit you need help, publicly. This was my debatable action, my moment of going too far. Trapping him was one thing. This was another. This was psychological warfare. But as I looked at his face, I felt no regret. He had tried to break my spirit in private. I was simply forcing him to confront his own behavior in public. It wasn't about destroying him. It was about forcing him to finally, for the first time in his life, take responsibility. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught between the humiliation of his imprisonment and the humiliation of the only path to freedom. He tried to reason, to bargain. He promised me anything, money, a public apology. He even, in a moment of sheer desperation, offered to give me credit for all my work, to make me a partner. But it was too late. His promises were worthless now. They were just the frantic gasps of a drowning man. In the end, there was no other choice. With a shaking hand, he walked to the wall where the projection was clearest and used his finger to navigate the floating cursor. He clicked the button. Book a live stream consultation now. He filled out his name, his email, and he selected the first available time slot. The moment he clicked confirm, a new page loaded. Thank you for your booking, and with a loud definitive clunk, the maglock on the exit door disengaged. The new reality had begun. The door swung open, and he just stood there for a moment, blinking in the dim lobby light. A man utterly defeated. He looked back at me, his eyes empty of all their former fire. There was no anger left, just a hollowed-out shame. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the building he had built, which had now become the scene of his greatest failure. I took a deep breath, the first truly deep breath I'd taken in years. It felt like I was expelling 3 years of toxicity, of walking on eggshells, of shrinking myself to fit into his world. I walked out of that room, not looking back, and into the lobby where Maya was waiting for me. She had a bottle of tequila in one hand, and my go bag in the other. She didn't say I told you so. She just opened her arms and gave me a hug. It was over. The fallout was both exactly what I expected, and more satisfying than I could have dreamed. Colin, true to form, tried to spin the story. He told his parents and investors that I was a disgruntled, hysterical ex who had a breakdown and sabotaged his systems. But the story had a hole in it he couldn't patch. Dr. Annabelle Voss, the therapist, being incredibly media savvy, saw a story. She didn't violate his privacy, but she did write a widely read blog post titled "When Grand Gestures Go Wrong," a cautionary tale in modern breakups, which described, in hypothetical terms, a scenario identical to ours. It went viral in our city's tech and business circles. People put 2 and 2 together. Whispers started. His reputation as a mastermind was suddenly tainted with a narrative of cruelty and instability. His bookings took a nosedive. Who Wants to Play a Game, designed by a guy who uses his own creations for personal revenge. His parents, Marcus and Eleanor, tried to threaten me with a lawsuit for defamations and emotional distress. My lawyer, funded by the generous salary I earned at the job they'd once called a hobby, sent them a single letter back. It outlined a countersuit for false imprisonment and detailed every contribution I'd ever made to Colin's company, complete with dates and witnesses, including former employees who were happy to talk. The threats stopped immediately. They vanished, pulling their money and their influence back into the shadows to protect what was left of the family name. As for me, I took the lessons I learned in that room, and I built something new. I quit my project management job and started my own consultancy. I design immersive experiences, not just for entertainment, but for corporate training, for therapy, for education. I use my skill for seeing flaws and finding solutions to build things that help people, not trap them. My company is thriving, and I give credit where credit is due. So here's the moral of the story, if you can call it that. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will underestimate you the most severely. They'll mistake your kindness for weakness, your support for subservience. They build a box for you, a role they expect you to play, and they get angry when you refuse to stay inside it. Colin's mistake wasn't just breaking up with me. His mistake was thinking he knew the limits of my world, because he had never bothered to look at the blueprints. He built a game he thought I would lose, and in doing so he gave me all the tools I needed to win. It wasn't about revenge in the end. It was about rewriting the rules. It was about taking the lock he put on my door and putting it on my life, sealing out the toxicity for good. If you're in a situation where you feel underestimated, unheard, or trapped, know this: you are almost always more powerful than you think you are. You know the systems, you know the patterns, you know the passwords. The door might seem locked, but sometimes, all you need to do is find the admin panel. Don't let anyone else be the game master of your life. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to be seen for who you really are, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story, because we're all in this together. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about taking your power back. You never know when you might need it.